In 2015, the Egyptian Museum was completely renewed. Which have been the priorities in the new setting up?
Well, it has been a very long process. I must say that I arrived in the museum on the 28th of April 2014 and I had 11 months to reopen the museum. In that time, the building or the rebuilding of the museum was going on, but there was at that time still not any scientific program. So the first priority was, first of all, to set up a team. You cannot do anything like this on your own, and I needed to have curators. I managed to hire right away 7 curators doing international calls, and so we built up a team that could work in different fields. What was our priority first? We had 11 months, so you should say a very short time, and the first thing I decided to do with the then only 2 curators, and little by little they became 7, to have a trip around Europe. We went to London to see the Enlightenment Room to understand how, in the time of the Enlightenment, museums were created, having material culture coming from all over the world to answer the main questions that mankind has. Main questions which are limited span of time which our life covers, suffering, death, etc., and how mankind in history and answer to these vital questions. Then we went to Manchester and to Oxford, where we saw 2 completely different ways of exhibiting. In Oxford, in the Ashmolean, there is this nice motto, crossing cultures, crossing times, where the material culture is not bound to its geographical and chronological boundaries, but is put into relationship with each other. So you can see how there is a continuum going from Egypt, the Near East, the Mediterranean, coming to the classical world. And then we went to Manchester, which is a typical archaeological museum, where the stress is on the great archaeologists of the past, starting from Petrie, their methodological approach to archaeology and what we have reached and how this can be envisioned in the museum. We went to the continent afterwards, Berlin and Munich, to see 2 museums where Egypt is represented as more as history of art. And coming back, so we started to realize what is the nature of our museum. And we realized that we have 2 different natures. One is antiquary, because part of the collection was bought in the antiquities market in 1824, 5,600 objects, and part is archaeological, because it comes from controlled excavations carried out in Egypt in the first 20 years of the 20th century. So we try to give voice to these different souls of the museum. So we're starting describing how the museum was born, how it was born in the moment when people realized that Nas faith, there was also the reason and the brain that could give shape and could give answers to the questions that mankind has. And then archaeology. So we decided to have contacts together. We decided to tell our public that the objects are not to be seen as objects of art, but as historical documents that can tell us the story and of the landscape, and the landscape that can be read as a book, where the different objects are different chapters, and only if we put them together we do understand the chronological evolution. So the main process was to decide what was the nature of the museum, how we should define it. From there on, we started choosing the sites we wanted to highlight. We chose the themes, and then we started developing an exhibition project and started choosing the objects. But I think it's very vital and important also to realize that a museum is not only the sum of its material culture. A museum is a research center, and if you understand that and you define the main focus where your research is going on, then you understand how you can do an exhibition. We should not take these 2 things apart. Myself, I do not make any difference between museums and universities. We are the same thing. We are research institution. Museum is made by women and men that work in the museum and every day make research on the collections. One of the parts of the collection is visible. The exhibition tells what the research is achieving. And also, that's also very important. I think that one has to choose for a model of museum where not only you can have a rotation of the material culture, but you can also constantly change your labels, change your panels, change your view, because as our views concerning archaeology changes, concerning chronology, concerning history, the same should happen in our museum. We should also enhance research in the gallery and make a kind of participatory museum where the public is informed about the research that we carry on.
Public archaeology is gradually spreading also in Italy, enhancing and giving more value to the relationship between archaeology and the public. Which are the ongoing and future projects of the museum in this field?
Well, we started following a project that the British Museum is also doing, using a software which is called MicroPast, and putting on display online objects that we have where the public could take part in our ongoing research. One of the projects was to help us cut out the contours of the photograph in order to make 3D models, and that could be done by the public following simple instructions. What we want to enhance in the near future is to put online all our archives. We have 39 linear meters of archaeological archive. We want to put all this archive online so that they can be copied and digitized by the public. When you do that, you always have a margin of mistake, of course, because when non-specialists take part in research, but you have to take it into account. On the other hand, though, what you reach is amazing because you involve the public in the research, you make them understand that museums belong to them, that collections belong to them, that they can help in the research, and I think this is fundamental. I would like to quote Article 9 of the Italian Constitution, which is fundamental for everybody who lives in these countries. The first 12 articles of our Constitution set up the fundamentals, principles on which the country is based. And Article 9 is about the cultural heritage, and actually says the Republic, and Republic is here really the translation of the Latin res publica, so the community takes care of the cultural heritage and enhance technical and scientific research. So research and cultural heritage are linked. That's why public archaeology can be a part of that. I also think that the major risk that the cultural heritage has is that of being forgotten. If it's forgotten, it's in danger. So not only we need to form specialists, but we need to be anchored in the society. We need a society to understand what we do. And what we are noticing in these years is that people really, really love research. We are doing also some special events. The museum takes part to the Night of Research, where we welcome, we open the museum at night, and researchers can come all night to see the research which is going on. So you see researchers and people in the gallery showing their ongoing research. And I do once a month a so-called walking with the director. People can book themselves online and they can visit the museum with me for 1.5 hours. And during this visit, I explain to the public what is the ongoing research at that time. And it's a very nice way of meeting people, or sharing ideas, and also in engaging them on what we're doing. So people might be interested, they ask whether they can come to be interns or they can be volunteers, etc.
In which way can museums establish roots in the social fabric and be perceived by the community as multicultural centers and bulwark of integrations?
I think this is fundamental in the nature of museums. First of all, I would like to quote Philippe de Montebello, the historical director of the Metropolitan Museum of Arts in New York, who used to say that museums cannot be so arrogant to think they have the right to exist, but they have to conquer their existence every day. What was he meaning? It was meaning actually that a museum is a political institution in the etymological terms, means it's linked to the life of the city. So it's part of the society, and to be part of the society has to address the society in different levels. What do we do here at the Museo Egizio? First of all, we try to define to which segments of the society we have to be in touch. Of course, we are a research museum. We are the second most important Egyptian archaeological collection outside of Egypt. So the first group we intend to address is the scholarly community, and of course we have to develop programs, we have to be in touch, we have to be at the service of scholarly community. Then right after, of course, schools, secondary schools, and we have a lot of programs with secondary schools. We welcome more or less 200 students every year who come here and they have to spend 150 hours before they take their degree to get in touch with what is a museum institutions. When we have primary schools, we have the most visited museums in Italy by primary schools. It's something that is the memory of everybody. On 4th grade they come to the Museo Egizio, which is amazing. In a busy time we welcome a school every 7 minutes, so we are very well visited. But then how can the museum root itself in the society? We have a program of social inclusion which is completely diversified. First of all, we bring the museum outside the museum. We have an activity which is called Bring a Museum Outside the Museum, which we carry out especially on Monday. And it means that me and my curators go to different and difficult places where people cannot come and reach the museum. So first of all, we go to hospitals, children's hospitals, where we have very sick children who cannot possibly leave the hospital, and we give classes to them, we engage them. Then we go to the prisons. We have all programs in prisons. We are in the main program of the prison of Turin for education in 2 parts. One part of scientific education and the other one is art historical. And we have prisoners who have to develop 3D models and copies of the objects. And these 3D models and copies are very used by the curators in the hospital. So the museum is a kind of bridge. We go to the prisons, we teach the material culture of ancient Egypt, prisoners make copies of our objects, and then we use the copies in the hospital. So 2 institutions could never be in dialogue, thanks to the museums are in dialogue. We have been engaged since 3 years also in a program of social inclusion for minorities. The first minority we want to look at are, of course, Egyptians, and in a broader sense, all people coming from Northern Africa and Near East, which somehow can share the value of the material culture that we house here. And we want to reverse perspective. So minorities and immigrants who might have a difficult period here in Italy, who might have a difficult path to gain acceptance and to gain their social role within society, all in a sudden when they come here, there are those who are more linked to this past. So they are not the foreigners anymore, the Italians are the foreigners. So we worked with 2 Egyptian schools where the children become kind of ambassadors and they teach to Italian children what their past is, so reversing these kind of aspects. And then last year was amazing. On the 24th of June, we celebrated the International Day of Immigration here in the museum. We worked with associations in the city and we brought immigrants to the museums, immigrants and Turinese. So the museum was open free of charge to be a place of meeting. Museums are place of meetings where people can meet with no barriers. Material culture speaks to everybody. So this is really, really important. Museums are extraordinary places. If we stand still and we look at this material culture, we can learn from it and we all become equal. So I think it's a fundamental role that museum must play in society nowadays. But museums are really rooted in society, and only if they gain their place there from bottom up, they deserve their right to exist.